Good afternoon. I'm Robert, and with me are Mike, Nate, and Salim, and together we are LymphaTech, and we're improving the lives of breast cancer survivors. Imagine someone you love has just survived breast cancer. Now imagine that her arm has permanently and painfully swollen up to 8 times its normal size. This debilitating condition is known as lymphedema, and it represents an inability of the lymph vessels to return fluid to the body due to the damage those vessels sustained through chemotherapy, radiation, and surgical procedures associated with breast cancer treatment. Lymphedema leaves breast cancer survivors with daily pain, depression, and an overall reduced quality of life. Each of my team members and I have been personally affected with a woman who has developed this disease, and these women are not anomalies. In fact, of the 2.7 million breast cancer survivors in the US today, half will develop lymphedema at some point during their lives. That makes lymphedema one of the most prevalent survivorship issues facing these women today. You can see here a progression of the disease in the woman's left arm as it goes from no swelling through a gross amount, indicated by the percentage above. In the earliest stages, the disease is actually reversible. All a doctor has to do is apply compression therapy and compression sleeves and massage for a period of 1 month at the cost of $1,000, and it actually cures the woman for life. She'll never get lymphedema again. But if the disease isn't caught until after 10% swelling, she's left with permanent swelling for life and has to undergo those same procedures at the cost of $250,000. The big problem here is that a tape measure, like the one you see here, is the current gold standard of diagnosis. It can't catch the disease until the 20% swelling mark, meaning that these women diagnosed with the tape measure are left with permanent swelling. Clearly, there's an urgent need for an early stage diagnostic, one that can detect the swelling before 10%. That's what was noted by the National Lymphedema Network, that the most critically needed advance in lymphedema care today is an early stage diagnostic. We've had conversations with these patients, their doctors, and hospital administrators, and we've identified the 3 key functions that this device needs to have. First, it needs to provide a measurement of the current state of the woman's arm, the current swelling. Second, it needs to give that early diagnosis so doctors can begin the treatment early enough to prevent the disease. And actually, the third function, it needs to be available for home use so that patients can take charge of their own care and monitor themselves regularly enough to catch it in that earliest stage. Currently available technologies range from the tape measure I just showed you all the way through the PET scan, but they all fall short because they can only show you the current level of swelling in the patient's arm. LymphaTech has developed a revolutionary diagnostic that can actually perform all 3 of these functions, and that's going to provide value to 3 distinct groups: patients, providers, and payers. To patients, we're going to improve their quality of life. We're going to empower them to take charge of their own care and reduce their worry of lymphedema. Their doctors are going to be able to improve the standard of care they provide to their patients in a way that's actually reimbursable. The tape measure is just rolled into the regular doctor's visit. Our device is a reimbursable procedure, and it actually satisfies a new American Cancer Society recommendation, one which they're unable to satisfy any other way, and that's really driving the market for our device. And finally, the insurance companies are looking to improve patient outcomes. Right now, patients are left with long-term worries, injuries, and high cost, and there's no way to rein it in. But a recent study in the Journal of Physical Therapy shows that a device exactly like ours in this space could reduce costs by 60%. That's a $2.5 billion savings annually here in the US. That's going to completely change the way we spend money on lymphedema here. In this new healthcare economy, we'll spend $300 per patient on diagnostic screening, and when you multiply that out by the patient population, you see we are addressing an $800 million market annually. But that's just part of the larger $5.6 billion market for breast cancer screening around the world.
So how do we actually deliver this value? Instead of looking at the symptoms, looking at the swelling, we look at the underlying physiology. We've generated the first ever lymphatic pressure measurement system. Think of a blood pressure measurement for your lymphatic vessels. Blood pressure revolutionized the way we treat and understand cardiovascular diseases. We think this has the same potential to transform the standard of care for lymphedema. So how does it actually work? Blood pressure is measured acoustically, but we can't actually do that for lymphatics. So we do it visually with an already FDA-approved near-infrared contrast dye. We use a very small microneedle, very small tip, inject the contrast dye into the skin. It's easy enough for a patient to use at home, already optimized for lymphatic uptake. Once we inject it in the skin, the vessels naturally take up this dye. We then add a pressure cuff on top of the patient's arm. but it's actually a much more robust pressure cuff. Within the cuff are a series of optics and sensors that can detect the presence or absence of the dye flowing through the vessels beneath the skin. Then the operation is very similar to a blood pressure cuff. As we increase the pressure in the cuff, the pressure gets high enough that the vessels close and the fluorescence is cleared out. We then gradually deflate the pressure in the cuff. Eventually the pressure gets low enough that the vessels open, the fluorescence is restored, and we define this as lymphatic pumping pressure, a powerfully simple solution to give a very quantitative result. Most importantly here, it's 9 times faster than the tape measure. The tape measure is done 4 centimeters up the arm, takes about 45 minutes to perform. So we're much more accurate and much more efficient. Current status of this technology, so I'm actually the inventor of this technology. This is my PhD research. I could talk about this literally all day. We have a lot of success in the lab in animal models, but perhaps most excitingly, we've already done first-in-man feasibility studies in humans. So you can see this video here. It's a little hard to see, but that's actually our dye flowing through the lymphatic vessels in a human. So we're very well positioned to take the next stage, go to FDA human clinical trials. And in fact, the NIH just recently awarded us a $2 million grant to further the development of our technology. The technology itself is very well protected. Robert Jones on our team is actually a registered patent agent. We have filed 2 provisional patents on the technology that's thus far, and we're working very aggressively to file utility patents. Georgia Tech does own the rights to this technology because it's a university-based research technology. We understand that in the interim, the most important thing for our company is getting that exclusive license. We have already begun negotiations. We have a term sheet in place. We're looking at about a 1% royalty fee agreement, and we're working very diligently over the next 3 months to get that deal closed. We also have the ability to protect our algorithm, how we actually quantify lymphatic pressure, as a trade secret. So this gives us protection moving forward. Looking at the business model, how we actually take this technology and generate revenue, it begins with the sale of the diagnostic itself for about $500 wholesale to 2 main customer groups. Doctors for use in the clinic, this would be tied into the regular oncology follow-up visits, and then patients for use at home monthly to supplement those oncology visits. The use of the device then represents a recurring source of revenue. This would be a subscription package, and in that subscription package would include a preloaded injection kit. This is a microneedle preloaded with the dye, easy enough for a patient to use. They do the injection, perform the scan, and the device sends the raw data to our remote servers. We can process all the data remotely. This allows us to keep our algorithm as a trade secret, but also get smarter and smarter over time as we collect more data and refine our algorithm. Once we process the data, we send the results back to the device, as well as automatically update the patient's electronic health records. We can keep very sequential measurements for each patient and denote very minute changes in lymphatic pressure to alert the doctor to prescribe the therapy in the very earliest stages. Looking at our revenue streams as a whole, the majority of our revenue comes from these recurring sources, so it's a very sustainable business model going forward, and overall we have 64% gross margins, which is very healthy for a business like ours.
So in order to take advantage of this opportunity, our first focus is on getting FDA clearance. Our device is what is called a combination device, meaning that it's composed of the multiple technologies that you see here that are already FDA approved, already on the market today for different uses. All we have to do is prove that the combination of these technologies poses no further risk to the patient than they do on their own. This is what is called a 510K de novo pathway, and it is one of the easiest ways to get FDA clearance. We'll then work with the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services in order to get insurance reimbursement. Fortunately enough, there's an existing CPT code for lymphatic imaging, meaning that doctors can actually get reimbursed for their time when using our device. All that's left for us to do is to apply for an add-on. This will allow doctors to get reimbursed for the device itself. And fortunately enough, again, this is a lot easier to attain than an actual CPT code. Through multiple discussions with experts related to the FDA and insurance reimbursement, we've come up with a series of milestones that we need to achieve in order to be successful here. And the first is a clinical trial to prove safety in the clinic. All we have to do here again is prove that the combination of already approved FDA technologies poses no greater risk to patients than they do on their own. The second is a clinical trial to prove safety for using the device at home. Here, we're only proving that using the device at home poses no greater risk than using the device in the clinic. And finally is a clinical trial to prove efficacy. This is where insurance reimbursement comes into play. And here we're just proving that our device is more efficacious than the gold standard, which is a tape measure. We already have a verbal commitment from Cancer Treatment Centers of America to host our clinical trial. So this will really help us expedite this process and get to market fast. So you can see we're getting through our regulatory barriers in only about 2 years and less than $1.3 million, which is much faster and cheaper than most medical device startups. This will allow us to attack this market fast. We'll then use a group of key opinion leaders at speaking events to communicate the success of our clinical trials to help generate demand. And we'll then begin to focus on our sales strategy. And what's unique about our sales strategy is we're focusing on 68 comprehensive cancer centers. These are called integrated delivery networks, and they're the result of the consolidation that's been occurring in the healthcare industry in the past few years. And this is important because the majority, 71% of breast cancer patients, are served by one of these 68 centers. So for instance, we make a single sale to one IDN, such as MD Anderson right here in Houston. They roll our device out to all of their physician offices and clinics that treat breast cancer patients. This provides us potential sales for multiple clinical uses, but more importantly, access to 2,600 patients. So this is an extremely efficient sales process. So to get our device in the hands of patients, we're going to partner with contracted independent sales reps that have relationships with decision makers at integrated delivery networks. These IDNs, the doctors at these IDNs will prescribe our device to patients. That's how we get into the hands of the patients. Another key aspect is leveraging the passion and awareness already out there for breast cancer survivors, such as groups with advocacy groups such as Susan G. Komen for the Cure and the Lymphedema Lighthouse Network. We know that if we can harness the passion and energy that exists out there and educate customers and patients on the survivorship issues such as lymphedema, we'll be able to pull our device through this sales cycle. We have strong relationships with physician champions at the Winship Cancer Institute at Emory and also Cancer Institute at Stanford, including Stan Roxon, who's the world's leading physician in lymphedema treatment. These physicians have told us that if we can prove our success in clinical trials, they will buy our device today because they want our device in their clinics as soon as possible.
Based on our initial forecasts, we're going to have an initial burn rate of $1 million in the first 2 years. After only 4 years of operations, we're going to break even after selling 100 diagnostic devices and ancillary products and services. We're going to reach a 35% operating margin in year 5. We're initially going to seek a $2 million capital investment. We're currently pursuing non-dilutive funding through SBIRs and grants. We're also considering debt and equity financing. With this money, we're going to complete FDA trials, successfully secure insurance reimbursement, finalize our patent, and finalize our prototype. At the end of year 2, we're going to need another capital injection of $3 million. And this is going to ramp up manufacturing, as well as finance working capital, and help us reach these milestones. So we're going to establish relationships with 8 IDNs, sell more than 15,000 diagnostics, increase our gross margins to 70%, and publish long-term efficacy studies. There are several exit opportunities. However, our most compelling exit opportunity happens in 2020. And this is when we have established demand for our business, as well as proven our business model. For example, in 2010, Hologic acquired a medical imaging diagnostic company using a 5.7 revenue multiplier and acquired the company for $85 million. If we're not able to exit at this opportunity, we're going to successfully, hopefully, file an IPO in 2024. And these are just 3 recent examples of medical imaging diagnostic companies that filed an IPO last year. We're a multidisciplinary team of students from Georgia Tech and Emory. Nate and I are MBAs, and we have more than 11 years of experience in healthcare consulting and financial services. Robert is an Emory law student and a registered patent agent. And Mike is our PhD. And he has more than 4 years of lymphedema research experience. His research is the foundation of our company. And through his lab, we're going to have access to any breakthroughs in this space. We're a young team, and so we've sought advice from business advisors, as well as scientific advisors. Our business advisors have successfully taken medical startups all the way through successful IPO exits. And our scientific advisors have helped us refine our technology, as well as helped us navigate the regulatory procedures. Currently, Mike is our acting CEO, but we'll be seeking to hire a new CEO, and she will be responsible for raising Series A and Series B funding, as well as refining our go-to-market strategy. We're also going to be working with contract researchers, manufacturers, and sales force. This is going to keep our company lean, as well as provide us additional flexibility in the future. We believe with this management team and these complementary assets, we're confident that we're going to successfully commercialize this technology.
So we want you to remember the importance of life after breast cancer. Lymphedema has been a long overlooked problem for these survivors.